Today's webinar topic is DocuSign and how it can impact your workplace. This webinar will dive into some of the considerations for digital signatures, show how the DocuSign integration works, and explain how to get started. Before we begin, I'd like to launch a quick poll to see where our audience is at on implementing and using digital signatures. So if you want to just take a moment and indicate whether you have started using digital signatures or not, we'll get an idea of what our baseline is at. Today's webinar will be appropriate for everybody. We'll have examples of how you can use it or how you might want to use it if you've started, and how you can begin if you haven't started yet. Looks like almost everyone's voted. I'll give it a couple more seconds for anybody who wants to get their answer in. All right, we'll wrap it up. Looks like 67% of you have not started using digital signatures yet, and 33% have. So we'll go ahead and continue on and see how you might be able to use it if you haven't already. So what are digital signatures? There is some question about what is considered a digital signature and the difference between a digital and electronic signature. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So digital signatures are defined by the federal government in the e-Sign Act. They consist of a sound, symbol, or process that's associated with a record with the intent to sign. All states do have laws defining electronic signatures that are similar to that. And you may, in addition, have a governing body for your agency that will have some guidelines for you or some requirements regarding digital signatures. What's the difference between a digital and electronic signature? Electronic signatures, or e-signatures, are a broad category of methods for signing documents. Digital signature providers such as DocuSign provide the following PKE protocol in order to manage their document signatures. We'll go through a little bit later in the presentation what the considerations are for legality and how some of the questions of digital signature compliance are handled. So now let's talk about how can you decide if digital signatures are for you. There's a lot of questions and things that might be holding you or your organization back, and I want to go through some of those considerations. But before we do, I have one more poll for today. And before I go through some of the concerns and some of the rebuttals for those concerns for digital signatures, let's just do another quick poll for what's your biggest concern about digital signatures. And we'll talk about some of the ways to get past them. Looks like about 80% of people have voted. A couple more seconds if you want to get in your answer about your biggest digital signature concern. And then we'll go through some of those. All right, I'm going to close it up. All right, so it looks like about half of you are worried about whether it's legal or not, or whether it will be compliant within your agency. About 33% are cost. For about 39–40% managing new technology, other, and a few of you are going to miss the wet ink smell. All right, so let's go through some of the things that are holding people back from digital signatures. A lot of times it's just as simple as a miscommunication about what's acceptable versus what's not within your agency. Just because something has not been done before doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be done. And so sometimes it's just a matter of asking the question, hey, can we accept digital signatures? We've worked with an agency within our client clients that has received a no, we can't do digital signatures, but then they had a counsel that was able to actually write that into the procedures that they could accept digital signatures, and it was simple as that. And after that, they were able to then collect digital signatures going forward. Sometimes it's misinformation. So sometimes if digital signatures were previously not compliant and now they are, then they're able to start collecting digital signatures if they then become acceptable. And just being able to check with the right people, check with the legal department, check with the governing agency to see if they're able to start collecting those digital signatures. And then, of course, there's the resistance to change in cultural norms. So that, again, is maybe just opening up the discussion of, hey, can we start doing this? Can we think about this? Are there some areas where we might be able to get and start collecting digital signatures or electronic signatures? So let's dive into it a little bit more. Let's actually think about what signatures you can prove. If you are in court, you can ask someone, hey, is this your signature? If the person denies it, how would you then prove it? If it's a piece of paper with some ink on it. If they had witnesses, you could prove it, but if no one witnessed them signing that piece of paper, then you might have to call in a handwriting expert, and those can be challenged in court. If you use digital signatures, you can have a timestamp, you can have a location, you can trace it back. You also have the person's signed image signature, which might go back to their account if they had an account created. So there's a whole lot more things that you would be able to use for proof if you used digital signatures. So there's two federal laws that are governing e-signatures. One is the e-Sign Act, and the other is the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act. These two work in combination to set the tone for the rest of the laws and governance throughout the United States. So let's talk about challenging those. So this is an actual court case where DocuSign was involved, a DocuSign signature, and because of the timestamp and the trail of information that is created when electronic and digital signatures are created, in this case, they were able to verify that the person that they had said was signing was in fact the signer. So let's talk a little bit about security, right? That's another big consideration with digital signatures. So you're sending out documents, they may or may not have private information on them, and you're collecting back a signature, which can a lot of times carry, financial considerations or legal considerations. So the flow of information when you send out a DocuSign signature is the data goes through a hash algorithm, and then it is encrypted with its own PKI, private information key, and then it's a digitally signed document. It goes then through the network, and then it's decrypted using the same algorithm for the verifier. So those in combination, DocuSign has worked very closely with the federal government to ensure that their processes will meet the federal legal requirements. So if you've been able to get past some of the objections and move on to using digital signatures, you'll get to start to experience some of the benefits of using digital signatures. The first one is that by allowing documents to be signed remotely, you can have and move business forward through people being on vacation or away from the office or on the road. You can go directly from one signer to the next instantaneously without the package or information having to come back to your office and being sent to the next signer. DocuSign allows you to go from signer to signer from one to the other without having to come back to the agency. And they can all be part of a single workflow, which also includes making them part of a single envelope, thus saving money as well. Electronic documents, when they're sent out for signature, can also have fillable fields in them, which are required, which can reduce your error rate of having documents come back signed that are not actually complete that need edits. You can also decrease your time for approvals so that you can turn around your business faster. That will, allow you to execute contracts faster, execute business faster, and along with the reduced hassle and overhead for employees, you also have reduced cost of postage or couriers or having people have to make copies and send them out. For those of you who work in the private sector or who have demanding public clients, this is also an improved client experience. So in this day and age, a lot of people are expecting and requesting digital signatures and digital delivery of information. By DocuSign having the ability to send out documents with digital signatures allows for that improved client experience. And all of this should result in less non-billable administrative time spent by your staff. All right, so we've gotten past some of the objections. We've bought into some of the benefits. So let's talk about how we can use DocuSign to collect digital signatures and what are some of the processes that we could get incorporated into DocuSign. So these are just a few of the processes that Cities Digital has worked with some of our clients or that we've used internally with our DocuSign process. Some of you may have interacted with our company in some of these ways. You can definitely use it for things like sales orders, new hire onboarding. You can use a Laserfiche form to indicate which federal forms you need to send out to a new hire or to an applicant and have them sign and fill out everything through DocuSign. You're able to send out non-disclosures or access requests really quickly using DocuSign with workflow. You can send out purchase requisitions as well. We have a lot of people using DocuSign with contracts just because of their nature of being associated with business. Those benefits are more direct and the cost and the ROI is more direct when you can use that with business that actually has financial ramifications. So contracts are a big one. You can either have the information all populated and just request a signature, or you can request signature of multiple parties, or you can have somebody fill out the information, then sign it and send it on to either more people to sign or back to the agency. If you're an agency that issues licenses, you're able to send out license applications or licenses themselves, the actual license document for your board to sign or for your official to sign. We also can do residential move-in or business move-in and move-out requests, which sometimes need to be turned around really quickly in order to move business forward. Cities Digital uses this for our statements of work and our contracts as well. And we'll see that process a little bit later in the demo section. As well as if you have regulatory compliance forms where it's really important that you have a record of certain things being signed and you have that within your agency to maintain compliance with different either federal or state agencies like OSHA forms or some of the other forms that you need to have all of your staff or certain staff sign and keep on file. Those are great ways to use DocuSign and workflow together is to keep up with compliance with those types of processes. So let's talk about DocuSign for a minute because DocuSign is a separate application. It's a separate service from Laserfiche. And so for our clients that we work with using Laserfiche already, this is another program. And Cities Digital provides that link or that integration between the two programs. And because DocuSign is often a new process for a lot of our clients, a new service entirely, we've taken that opportunity to get to know the program really well so that we can help you to implement it should you be ready to and need some guidance just on the DocuSign side as well as the integration side. So let's talk about what you can do within the DocuSign program. And we'll look at it a little bit when we get to the demo as well. But just in general, DocuSign can be used to create templates. So just like in any ECM speech, templates are documents where maybe the information is in the same spot every time on the document, and maybe the signature is in the same spot as well. So if you're continually sending, this case, this is just an example form. If you're continually sending out the same form, you just need somebody to date and sign it. You just create that as a template in DocuSign. And Laserfiche can send, the integration can send over the information that's populated automatically from your repository if you already have those fields. And then as soon as that envelope is sent to DocuSign, it recognizes it as a template and it puts the signature in the right spot and the date and any other required fields or information that you're pushing up to DocuSign in the right spot and sends it out. So this we've seen used for contracts, statements of work, any other licensing forms where the signature is always in the same spot. They do also have proximity signatures. So if you're sending out, say, contracts that have varying lengths, but there's always a signature page at the end, you can have DocuSign automatically tell where the signature and date should be based on it just being on the last page or being next to a certain type of language. So just because you have documents that aren't exactly the same every time doesn't mean you can't use templates. The next thing you can do is you can place signatures manually. So let's say you ad hoc come up with a document that you need people to sign, or it's a new form and you just need to get it out the door. You can place signatures and fields of information directly on the document before sending it out. So this gives you the flexibility of being able to create both templated files and save yourself a little time of having to set them up, and ad hoc files where you just need to put a signature on and send it out, and it might be a once in a while thing. DocuSign also allows you to have a nice inbox where you can tell what's been already out for signature. So in this case, you can see things that we're waiting on, things that are completed, and things that have been voided. So we're able to see if someone declined to sign one of our files, we're able to see it right in our inbox, and the ones that are completed. And if you have your own DocuSign account, you're able to see how many documents are waiting for your signature and how many you're waiting for other people's signatures. And there's also a mobile application. So if you're a person who's on the road a lot, but you still want to be able to use DocuSign and monitor your signatures that are out, you're able to use this from your mobile device to be able to keep track of everything. All right, so now we're going to look at the DocuSign and the DocuSign integration functionality on its own in a demo environment. So what we're going to look at is being able to create those on-demand signatures. So the client integration itself, it's directly through the Laserfiche client. And then we're going to look at how to automate sending out signature requests with workflow and sending signatures after filling out a Laserfiche form. So one of the nice things for those of you who have worked with Laserfiche before, you know it's a great platform that can be used for all different types of files and processes because it's so open. So we're just going to give a couple of examples, but these are really flexible and they're absolutely able to be implemented in a ton of different ways. So if you have any questions as I'm going through this, you can post them into the questions area or save them for the end when we go through the questions and discussions. All right, I'm just going to switch over to my demo environment here. Okay, so this is my Laserfiche Thick client, and you can send documents to DocuSign from the Thick client just by selecting the document and clicking on the DocuSign button in your toolbar. So once you have the DocuSign integration installed, you're able to put a button on your toolbar that looks like this is the icon, and that will send the document that you have in your Laserfiche client up to DocuSign. All you need to make this work after you've got it installed is a template with an email address on it. So if we look here, this is my actual template that I use every day. And all I have to do is make sure that the email that I've set up to interact with the DocuSign integration is populated. I'm going to use my email address just today for ease of use, but it can go to anyone. It doesn't have to be a Laserfiche user. It doesn't have to be someone within your organization or your domain. You can send DocuSign envelopes to anyone with an email address. So to make the DocuSign integration work in its simplest form, you just click on the document to select it, and then you click on your toolbar button. And that's going to bring up our DocuSign, a little window here. And it's just saying it's pushing up all the metadata and information up to DocuSign. And then it's going to open up that DocuSign interface for me. And this is, I'm demonstrating the most manual process first. So this is where I'm setting it up completely from scratch. I'm just sending a blank document. I'm going to manually place the signature and the date signed just so you can see how easy it is. So here's my Word document. DocuSign converted it automatically to a PDF for me. So when I send this out, it's not going to be an editable file. I just scroll down to the signature area of my document. I click and drag my signature. I can make it required or not over here. I can put the date. That's going to automatically fill. And then I can make somebody actually print their name as well and put, just for fun, we'll also put the title. Those can all be required so that I'm never getting one back without it filled out. And then all I have to do is click send. And it goes to the email address that I had on my Laserfiche template. So that's automatically pulled through the integration so that I don't have to fill that out separately. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my email that I got. And then we'll be able to see what the signing process looks like to the end user. So it just takes a second to come through. And then here it is. So this is the email that your end user gets. You can definitely customize this information, and we'll see it customized in the next demo as well. So all they're going to have to do is review the document. Again, they don't have to have a DocuSign account. They don't have to sign in to be able to sign it. They're authenticated based on the email that you sent it to. So this is going to be what your clients or your audience will experience. They just click continue. Click the start button. That takes them straight down to the signature, but they can always scroll through and review everything. I have a just general signature saved in here, but they'll be able to either sign using their mouse, or if they're using an iPad, they can sign with their finger, or they can type in their signature just like any other typical signature service. So you can see there's my signature. It automatically pulled my name from that, and then I can type in my title. In my case, it's remembering my title from this demo account, but I could type it in if it was something different, and it automatically populated the date. So both from the staff perspective as well as from the end user signer perspective, this has been a really quick and easy process. So I just click finish once I'm done with my review and signature, and then that's it. Now it's signed, and all we're waiting for next will be sending it back to our Laserfiche repository. So if we go back to our repository view and I open up my metadata, I can see that within Laserfiche, once I send out a document for signature through the DocuSign integration, my fields of information are for DocuSign are populated here. You can see that the document status is delivered, and you can see what date and time it was sent. And then once it's complete, that will update throughout the process. So once it's reviewed, it will update to reviewed. And once that process is complete on the original, if I open it back up, we'll be able to see my document status says completed, and the date and time that it was sent stays the same. You can track more information here. Mine is just a basic configuration, but you could track when it was completed. You could get some more envelope information from that and store that in metadata as well. So you have a lot of options with how you report this back to your Laserfiche client. So now we can see that our DocuSign signed copy came back. If I open that up, I'll be able to see it's a PDF version of that Word document. I used my fancy font so you can see it changed it a little bit. But there's my signature, the date, the recipient is my name, and my title. So you can see that it took everything that I put into DocuSign and just sent it back as an image file. And you can do a lot of things with workflow to process this a little bit more if you want. A lot of times you see people, instead of just being a 2 here, might have it might be the signed copy. You could create a link group with the 2 signed and unsigned copies, or you could just have workflow delete the unsigned copy once the signed copy comes back. One of the downloads after this webinar will be a search that you can load into either Web Access or the Laserfiche client that will show you all of your documents through the client that are out for signature if you don't have direct access to the DocuSign inbox. All right, so the next thing I want to show is, let's say we have something like a typical process like HR onboarding or new client onboarding, or something where it's pretty formulaic what we're doing, and we're collecting some information up front that we then want to push to DocuSign into forms to save our clients or our members of the public some data entry, and be able to still collect signatures. So what I'm going to do is switch over to my form, where I'm going to demonstrate how to fill out a Laserfiche form and send that information to DocuSign. So that will be my next step here. Let's pull up that. All right, so this is our new client sample questionnaire. This is the city's digital team here. And you can see, for those of you who are familiar with Laserfiche forms, this is a tab-based form. So we can just fill out our categories of information that we're looking to collect. And you can see I've pre-filled this with some information just so you don't have to watch me type this whole time. And what I would be doing those, just being on the phone and collecting this information with my new client possibility. And I could go in and fill these out. This is just a Laserfiche form, so this is all, could be optional or could be required. I'm just going to go through. I'm going to skip most of this because I don't need most of this information for this process. But these questions and the options here are completely customizable. But once I submit this, what that's going to do is create a number of already populated PDF forms for me in my Laserfiche client. And I could send these straight to DocuSign, but what I wanted to do is show you what that looks like. So once that form gets submitted, it's going to create this set of documents that I would typically manually create maybe, or manually fill out, or possibly have my new client prospect manually fill out. And what it's going to do is just send each one of these documents in here, the one that we just filled out. And then we're able to send all of these, or just the ones that need to be signed, directly out to the client. But this time, instead of sending it manually, because this is a templated file, I can send it out using workflow. So you can see there's my first file that came in. This is taking a little bit of time because what it's doing is it's going from Laserfiche forms to workflow and then to the client. And then I'm going to take these files, I'm just going to choose one, and send it using a business process, which is an on-demand Laserfiche workflow. And I'm going to use the business process and the DocuSign custom workflow activities to send to DocuSign through workflow. And again, this could be something that sends automatically, but in this case, I wanted to show you the metadata that gets populated automatically by forms. And then I can also use, in this case, I'm going to use an email that's not having to be populated in the metadata, but it's going to be assigned by workflow. So if you don't want your users to always have to look up the email for every client, you can use a lookup into your, say, CRM or some other program and use that to populate. So what I'm going to do is start my business process. I just, again, like before though, click on the document and then click on the toolbar button. It says, are you sure you want to start this business process? I click yes. You just get a notification that I successfully launched that. And then this business process is going to be very similar. It's going to send the information up to DocuSign, but you'll be able to see that instead of DocuSign popping up and having me place the fields and the signature, it's just going to send the email out automatically. And in this case, it's actually sending out 2 emails because it's going to my client and then it's going to a compliance person. So this was a Schwab account transfer form, and I wanted to show you a couple of things in this email as well that weren't in the previous demo. The first one is that some of that information that we had filled out during our forms population process and the workflow has now been automatically pushed into the subject of the email, as well as the subject of the email and the content of the DocuSign envelope instructions. This just has a few pieces of metadata that were populated, but you could certainly use this to provide detailed instructions or next steps or personalized information to any of your clients. So I just click Review Document, and again, I get the option to sign a document. In this case, it's a form-based document, so my signature is already placed for me. So I'm just going to click Continue, and again, I'm going to click Start. Here's my signature that's required. That's all I have to do in this case because if you look up above, some of the information that I had populated was already filled out. So you can see that my recipient signature is already here. Sorry, that is the next one. So I click Finish. And then what it does is it goes on to the next person. So I'm going to open the next email and I'll show you, in this case, my example is going to a second person. And this is the compliance review, the simulated compliance review. And in this case, the compliance person can put their signature where they like. So a lot of times compliance will just sign at the top or put their initials at the top. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to put my initial at the top of that document and click Finish. All right, so again, this was set up in the workflow to go to multiple different people to get signed. And so what they're able to do is you can set any number of signatures that are collected. So in this case, it went to the client first, that's me, and then it went to our simulated compliance officer, which was our consulting@citiesdigital.com email address. And then after all the signers are complete, what happens is the document again comes back as a signed document into your Laserfiche repository and collects any envelope information that you wanted it to bring back into your repository, and you have the PDF with the initials and signatures. In this case, you can see with this workflow, I've collected the DocuSign envelope ID, the sent date, and the signed date instead of just the sent date. I've used one that I did a little bit earlier this morning just so we didn't have to wait for it to come all the way through. But basically it's just delivering it back to the repository the same as we did with our manual way. It just handled some of the logistics of that more automated. So what I like to do now is switch over and just kind of show you a little bit behind the scenes what that looks like. So you can already see from the end user perspective as well as from the person who's collecting signatures, this is a really easy process. We've automated some of our data entry. We've automated where the signatures are. we've automated some of the things that are required to be collected, and we've either automated pushing that information up, or we can put the fields onto our form and make them required to be filled out before the document is submitted back to us. But let's see what that looks like for the person who's setting it up. I'm not sure if there's any Laserfiche administrators out there watching today, but if you're the person who's going to be setting these workflows up, I imagine you might want to see what you're in for. So this is the business process that we just saw. So sending a document to DocuSign. So what we've done is we submitted a Laserfiche form. So our Laserfiche form itself, the process had only one activity in that form's process, and that was to send that form, so that initial client questionnaire, the form variables to workflow. So now we're in workflow, and all we have to do is retrieve the values that we want to push. In this case, this is what we didn't push terribly much information to workflow, but in this case, we're pushed the household name, and then we're assigning the field values. These are the field values that DocuSign is going to use to communicate with the Laserfiche client. So these are the things that when we send up to DocuSign, we're filling out the email addresses. In this case, it's not variable, but it could be populated by a lookup. And we're also populating the recipient. And then we're also retrieving field values. So we're just retrieving whatever we might have put into DocuSign email address. Since it's a multi-value field, in this case, we're sending it out to multiple people in a row, and the DocuSign recipient's name. And then what we're doing is for each value, we're requesting, this is the Laserfiche custom workflow activity for DocuSign. This is a city's digital product as well. This comes with the integration, but it's optional. And we can request this particular activity is to request the DocuSign signature with an attachment. And important to note that when you're requesting documents with workflow, it's using one of your DocuSign templates. So all of that information exchange is already set up, automated within DocuSign so that it always goes to the right spot. But the workflow is not terribly long or complicated. We have a few different options for the DocuSign activities within workflow. We can request the DocuSign signature. We can request it with an attachment. That's why if you have a document that you need to send out for a signature, but you also typically send a sheet of instructions or maybe a welcome packet. You can retrieve the DocuSign envelope status XML or the envelope XML in case you want to prepare reports from the envelopes that are already out to DocuSign for signature, or if you want to just make sure to update on a regular basis or a specific interval your metadata that's associated with your DocuSign envelopes. So there's a lot of different ways that you can configure this. This is just one example of what it might look like. All right, so now I'm going to switch back to our presentation and we'll just finish up and then we'll open it up for questions. All right, we'll just pull that up. Okay, so let's say you've gotten past your objections, you've decided that you want some of the benefits, you know what you're in for because you've seen the demo and you want to start collecting digital signatures. So let's get started. Cities Digital is able to facilitate all of the transactions that you need to get started with the DocuSign signatures. We can offer your DocuSign licensing and your envelope licenses directly. We offer the integration with Laserfiche. We created it, we maintain it, and we can provide it directly. We also can provide the DocuSign workflow activities. These are, again, things that we created and we can provide directly. And we can also help you out if you decide to get a signature, signature appliance, the cosign integration. We can get that as well. So if you're ready to get started, here's what you need to get started with DocuSign. You need a DocuSign account with the listener enabled. That's important. That's what facilitates those communications between Laserfiche and DocuSign, back and forth. You need a Cities Digital DocuSign integration, Laserfiche 9.0 or newer. Remember that this DocuSign integration works with the thick client. Your workstation should be Windows 7 or newer. And then to facilitate these secure transactions on the server, you need an SSL certificate. Optional, if you have Laserfiche workflow, these are really valuable to have. But if you don't have Laserfiche workflow, you can still use the DocuSign integration. If you have Laserfiche workflow, though, you can also get the DocuSign custom workflow activities. All right, so after the presentation is over, we're going to have a quick survey. I really encourage you to please fill it out. I would love to hear your feedback. We also solicit ideas for the next webinar, so if you want to have some input into what you see next month, or the month after actually, because next month's already set, please do fill out your ideas and requests. We look through all of them, and by popular demand, this was definitely one of them, and last month's was based on requests as well. If you take the survey, you could also win this super awesome shirt that tells everyone that you don't sign with pen and paper anymore. You use electronic signatures. Also, who could resist an MC Hammer shout out? And then for next time, if you want to join us again, our next webinar is going to be an ECM bootcamp. How to prepare, the tools you need, and measuring your results when you're implementing ECM. This is going to have content for people who haven't started their ECM journey, and it's also going to have some tips for those of you who have started, maybe have implemented or have been using it for a while, and are ready to implement some changes. So we'll talk about change management, some of the tools that you can have that you'll need, and that kind of thing. And that is it for my presentation today. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions now. We'll go through the questions that you've submitted. If you have not submitted a question, or if you have one, you can feel free to type it in now. I'm just going to go through them. All right, I'm just going to start at the top, so bear with me here. All right, so the question is, or one of the questions is, can you email multiple parties? And the answer is yes, you can email multiple parties using DocuSign. You can, using the workflow, you could send out signatures to, or envelopes to multiple different people at the same time. So if you have a distribution list, or like every year you need your employees to renew their employee agreement, you can send that all out using a lookup and workflow. So you could send out 50 at the click of one button. In addition, you can also send out sequential signatures to people using one DocuSign envelope. So if you need signer 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can set it up that way too, so it's going from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. The next question is similar to that. The next question is, if you want the envelope to be stored in Laserfiche after it's signed, does the process need to start within Laserfiche, or can an envelope that started in DocuSign be routed to Laserfiche once it's signed? So you can retrieve information from DocuSign if you have that listener enabled, and if you have the workflow activities, you can go and retrieve. One of the activities is to retrieve envelopes or retrieve envelope XMLs. So depending on if you're just looking for the data or if you're looking for the whole envelope, you can use your workflow to go retrieve things that have been stored in Laserfiche, or sorry, in DocuSign. The next question is, can you require ID verification for all outgoing envelopes rather than purely relying on email verification? So there are some options for requiring checklists. That would be something that you would set up with DocuSign if you want to require some sort of verification or entry before signing, but that would be on the DocuSign side. and it can be set up on an account-by-account basis. The next question is, when the signed form comes back to the repository, do we need to add metadata and then refile? And the answer is it shouldn't be. By default, it will come back to the folder that you sent it from. So as long as you want it to come back to the folder that you sent from, then you shouldn't need to add anything or change anything. If you wanted it to come back to a single place, you could do that as well. Or if you wanted signed documents to go somewhere else once they're signed, you could have workflow refile, but you shouldn't need to change anything. The next question is, can we have DocuSign and documents back not as PDF but as TIFF files? And DocuSign sends back just PDFs at this point, so that's not an option right now. But again, I believe Laserfiche, one of these upcoming versions, may have some other options, but right now it's coming back as a PDF, and that's the only option. The next question is, does the web client perform the same way as the thick client? And if we're talking about the DocuSign integration and the workflow activities, the answer is no in this case. This ability to send documents out using this pop-up and the workflow activities only performs in the thick client. That being said, you can absolutely review all the metadata and review anything that you've sent out through DocuSign through the web client after it's back. Next question is, do you have to send documents through DocuSign platform? All of our emails to clients have to be archived. And using the DocuSign integration and using the DocuSign signature application really does require sending out those correspondences through DocuSign. It's part of their secured process, and it requires the interface and the timestamps and the whole backend database and data transactions and tracking to go through their system. So yes, in that case, it does have to go through DocuSign. That being said, you can get all of the metadata back from the envelope, and that may be an acceptable record for what you're sending out to clients. The next question is about web access. This does not require web access. The next question is, do third parties accept client signatures? If we send a DocuSign envelope to a client to sign a Schwab form, how then do we send it on to Schwab? So you have a couple options depending on how you normally send things to Schwab, but if you normally send them to them using a file transfer protocol or some other transfer, or if you just send them the data, you're able to do that using workflow. So you could, with workflow, you could get an export activity and send it to a location that's automatically shuttled over to Schwab. So you have some options there. What happens, the next question is, what happens to the summary sheet? So if you're talking about the form that gets filled out in Laserfiche forms, then that could be archived to the Laserfiche client just as a saved Laserfiche form. So it looks basically like a printout of the web form. That's how most people would do it, is just collect that initial information and show what was initially collected before it gets sent out to DocuSign or processed to those PDFs. So that can just be saved just like you would normally save your paperwork, your initial notes or your initial filled out client intake form. The next question is, if Cities Digital is maintaining the DocuSign workflow for us, can we take this with us if we decide to go to a new document storage vendor? And the answer is you can take your DocuSign account, because that's through DocuSign. The workflow itself, the workflow activities you'll own, you can take those with you, but they only work in Laserfiche workflow. So you would need to still have Laserfiche workflow. The next question is the difference between electronic and digital signatures again. So electronic signatures encompasses kind of all of the different methods of signing a document or a record. A digital signature, like what's used for DocuSign, uses specific technical implementation, and so it uses what's called a public key infrastructure to provide that back-end validation and to track information about the signature, or the signer and the signature and the whole process. And they maintain that information in a database, and that's been, they've worked with the government to be able to provide a compliant solution. DocuSign cost structure. So the DocuSign cost structure is per envelope, which means that every time you send out a document for signature, that is an envelope. So you're paying per envelope, and the cost fluctuates a little bit based on, I think, quantity. And if you're interested in more specific pricing options, our sales department can definitely get you some idea of what the cost is based on the quantities that you anticipate. The next question is, can a Laserfiche integration happen after DocuSign is implemented as a product at your city? And absolutely, you can add the DocuSign integration to Laserfiche if you have Laserfiche first, or you can add Laserfiche to your DocuSign integration if you have DocuSign first. So if you already are using DocuSign and you want to connect it to Laserfiche because you've started implementing that, you just need to contact your DocuSign rep and tell them you'd like to have the listener enabled for your DocuSign account, and then connect with us to be able to get that integration and or the workflow activities. The next question is, can you set an option up to receive email notifications once the document has come back to Laserfiche, or any status changes? Or do you constantly have to check the return forms? And the answer is absolutely. You can send out reports, you can collect that information, because the listener for DocuSign is constantly reporting back to the Laserfiche client any status changes. So it shows you whether the document's been, first it's sent, then whether it's been reviewed, then whether it's been completed, or some other status that we can see in the inbox. So those are constantly being sent back to the Laserfiche client. But if you want to get email notifications of that, you can have Workflow monitor those fields and send out maybe notifications every time it changes. Or if that's too much because you're getting a lot of volume there, you can send it out just as it, like on a daily basis. You can say, show me all the envelopes that I have that are pending, or that have been voided, or that have been rejected. The next question is, if someone's already a full DocuSign licensed user, is there an integration option if there was a desire to marry Laserfiche and DocuSign? And the answer again just goes back to the listener. You just have to get that listener set up, and then you can use an integration. The next question is, can Workflow be set up to route completed paperwork directly to an investment custodian? All right, so that, again, it depends on how you normally transfer that information. Workflow can, if you have the custom workflow activity to export documents, can export to someplace. If you have a web service, we can use a web service to do that. So that is possible. How do spouses legally sign if they use the same email address is the question. And that would be, they're still going to have to use their signature. So they'll still have to type in their information, and then it comes down to an intent to sign question if it were ever to be challenged. The next question is, you needing a DocuSign account for a county with only a few people managing Laserfiche, but many users. Would DocuSign require multiple licenses or just a single account? So most clients that we work with, because we work with B2B clients, will have a single account usually that's accessible to multiple people. That being said, we also have people, if you're more independent in your agency and you need to be able to separate out your signature envelopes to different people, you can also have separate DocuSign accounts. So you can certainly use it as a collective or separate. The next question is, can you customize the email address from DocuSign so the recipient is aware that this is from your organization? And absolutely you can. If you saw during the demo, ours says that it's coming from the consulting team via DocuSign. So it usually will say who's sending it. So you could just say it's coming from your organization name via DocuSign. That way, hopefully they'll see that it's coming from someone they expect. The next question, is there a concurrent license model or do licenses need to be purchased per name user? And the answer is DocuSign licensing is separate. So you'll need a DocuSign license of some type, whether it's that collective one or separated out. But DocuSign itself charges and prices by envelope mainly. So you'll be able to use the same kind of organizational account to send out envelopes. But in order to access those documents from the Laserfiche client, those people will need a named or concurrent user. Next question, is there a way to solicit signatures other than by email? Example is a board meeting where board members request to review the document and sign the same time without having to open up emails and sign. And DocuSign just sends out by email. So you can send out to everybody at the same time if you wanted to, but it's still going to go to their email for the DocuSign integration anyway, or the DocuSign envelope. The next question is, are the Laserfiche forms encrypted or secure? And could you use the same SSL certificate for Laserfiche forms that you have in place for the DocuSign integration? So our IT team could probably help you a little better than I could with determining what kind of SSL certificate you need. I know that there are some kinds that you can use for multiple applications and multiple servers, and there are some kinds that you can use just for a single one. But if you have forms and DocuSign integration on the same server, you should be able to use the same certificate. The next question is, when does the form get signed? It looked like you could change metadata before it was finalized. So the form can get sent out for signature anytime. So in my manual example, it gets sent out for signature and gets signed once I press the button in the Laserfiche client. If I had a fully automated process, it could go out for signature right when I submitted a Laserfiche form, for instance, or right when I changed a piece of metadata on a document in Laserfiche saying that it was finalized. So you can send it out either of those ways, and it gets signed when they get the email. The next question is, can you require a separate attachment to be sent along with the DocuSign document? And that's absolutely, you can just have that as part of the template. And then there's a question of, let's see. Will the document returned from DocuSign have OCR capabilities? And it's a PDF, so it comes back with a native text stream. So you're able to absolutely, as part of your normal OCR process, make sure that that document is text searchable. And then the last question is about a copy of the webinar. And as part of the follow-up for this webinar, you'll get a copy, a link to the recorded webinar so that you'll be able to watch it or share it going forward. And I believe that's everybody. That's all the questions. So, and we are at time. So I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to send them in to either consulting@citiesdigital.com, and we'll make sure to answer them. Also, feel free to submit them in your survey. So I'll get to those too if you have any follow-up questions or anything that I didn't get to. Once again, thank you everybody for attending the Cities Digital webinar on DocuSign and the impact it could have on your workplace. And I hope to see you again next month for our ECM Bootcamp. Thanks, everybody.